Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, April 2nd, 2021. Time for another show. Time to remind you that Matt Gaetz is apparently a huge pervert. And what a great way to start the show today. I'm having to double check on things this morning as I weed through what's occurring to people on the morning Twitter feed. And just having to double check because a lot of the stories, of course, do come from yesterday's news, or were reported in yesterday's news, and yesterday was, of course, April 1st, and you never know, and I think that people are beyond circulating a CNN story that says that Matt Gaetz used to show nude photos of the girls he was sleeping with to fellow legislators and play the guess how old she is game. Bad game, by the way. And I thought, well, I don't think that they would circulate that as an April Fool's joke, as tempting as that may be, but I just got to be sure. And I think the first I saw of it was someone's screenshot of a CNN chyron that said that. And then I was like, well, geez, that's too fakeable. I better just check. But CNN is actually reporting it. And now that they are reporting it, and I see it this way, I think that I'm trying to figure out whether this is the old accusation against Matt Gaetz, which I think is probably still true, or a new one. And I was all set to dismiss it as an old one, but it turns out to be a new one. Do you want to just start with the Matt Gaetz thing? I mean, I guess we could go into that. I'll tell you what else is on tap for today. Nothing. That's it. It's all, well, no. Okay. In our 10 o'clock hour, I thought, if we ever get past the Matt Gaetz story, and we really should. I mean, it's not that hard to tell the story and do it quickly. He's a horned dog, and he can't keep it in his pants and doesn't think he should have to, and has gotten busted. There are a couple angles to it, and it's all very interesting. But in case we decide to do something serious, there you go. You have the story. And we'll try and straighten out the other various angles on it. It is kind of interesting, and people will be talking about it over the weekend. 10 o'clock hour, though, the intention was, when I was going to do a serious show, you see, and I was never going to do that, was to talk a little bit about the Biden infrastructure plan and what's going to be in it, and we should probably figure out what's the name we're going to be using for this thing so that we can refer to it properly and do our messaging right. But lots of good write-ups about what's in it and the very many things that are being redefined as infrastructure, and I think correctly so, but directing money into places that are, really ought to be considered critical for our, well, certainly for our economic infrastructure, even if we don't typically think of it as physical infrastructure like roads and buildings and whatnot. But anyway, one of the big questions, of course, whenever you start spending tremendous amounts of money, is how are you going to pay for it? And one of the big responses that we've tried to remind people of, but not always all that convincingly because it's not really in our wheelhouse here, but we remind people, well, one, Republicans never ask that when they're in charge. And two, it might not matter no matter who's in charge, because as we learned some time ago in exploring the peripheries of modern monetary theory, that, we learned that there's a theory under which it really just doesn't matter how you're going to pay for it, how much is it going to cost, because, of course, we issue our own currency in this country. And as nonsensical as it seems to those of us who don't issue our own currency, there's a real theory to it. And one of the folks who's done the best job explaining it to us in the past, Arliss Bunny, has offered to come back and will join us during the 10 o'clock hour and try and explain it. And it's timely again because we're going to face those questions again. And by the way, I mean, I still think we're stuck in the cycle wherein Democrats like, Well, Joe Biden, he's been around for a while, and he's kind of used to saying how he'll pay for things, and takes it as a point of pride to describe how he's thought this through. And, it's nice to be able to answer questions like that with a traditional answer, but it might be wise to refresh our memory as to why exactly it doesn't matter and how that sort of thing can actually work. And it's becoming more and more widely accepted that even if you won't describe yourself necessarily as a modern monetary theorist, certainly, or a modern monetary theory convert or devotee or anything, or just curious about it, it pays to know what people are talking about, and we're enjoying the idea that people are freeing themselves from the tyranny, being chained to this idea that somebody somewhere is going to have to suffer cuts if you want to make an investment in something important. Again, that might work at the kitchen table, but that's only because you don't print your own currency. All right, so we'll catch up with all of that, and I thought it would be just a good time to do that as we expect Congress to return and start debating the subject in earnest very soon. And certainly Republicans will try to make it center around how will you pay for it. Democrats, traditional or otherwise, will have at least an answer. And there are some good ones that actually, consider where might we make up those differences. And there are some good places to do it and some good reasons to do those things, even if we weren't going to invest that money in infrastructure. But to the extent that there's a gap between them, or you don't really want to play the Republicans' game, it's wise to get hold of the theory by which you would no longer have to. That's at least one of the options available to you. All right, let's see. Yes, I'm reminded by my notes from Justice today. This is the one time each year where I can say something like, "Hey, by the way, good morning. Good Friday morning to you," and then not have to say, "Oh, and it's not actually Good Friday. I'm just kidding about that. But I just hope you have a generic Good Friday, not a capital G Good Friday morning." But now I get to say the whole thing with capital letters and everything. So hello, and that reminds me. I don't know. I jumped straight into the Matt Gaetz thing, so I bypassed checking the Twitters this morning. I otherwise would have missed Bill's morning tweet announcing to you that which you know by this point, of course, that the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. But why does, he asks, Kagro X always say it's live at 9 a.m. Eastern Time? Why is he communicating with extraterrestrials? Oh, I see. It's 9 a.m. ET. Yes, okay. That's just headline speak, of course, for Eastern Time. Why is he communicating with extraterrestrials? That's a better question. Certainly more fun. Is it part of a cosmic conspiracy? And why isn't he sharing his jelly beans? We want answers. Oh, okay. I thought there were Reese's Pieces in the movie. But now, of course, because of peanut allergies, the new director's cut has to change them to jelly beans. I think that might actually work as an excuse. And Ricky already expressing interest in getting a hold of some of those jelly beans. Oh, but she likes the black ones. Okay, so a licorice fan. Excellent. Good. I'm sure. I don't know. What do you think, Bill? You happy to get rid of those? Or do you hoard those for yourself? You can have all of mine anyway. All right. Let's see. Where were we? Greg sends me an article this morning. I better check in on that one. Oh, look. It's Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz, being reported in the Daily Beast. Republicans waste no time burying meanest person Matt Gaetz after teen sex allegation. Interesting. A different angle on a similar story I've seen, and I think I grabbed a headline or two and put it away in pocket. Let's see. Is it around? Is it the one I'm thinking of? I thought I saw a headline circulating yesterday that said, basically, that Republicans were, at the minimum, not unhappy that scandal had caught up with Matt Gaetz. And I guess part of the reason, I guess that ties into the other headline, the one I thought I saw and was double checking on CNN, that he was, playing the, hey, look at this one guess how old she is game with the rest of them. And I guess they probably all thought, what the hell, how does this guy get away with it? I mean, probably a good percentage of them thought, can I do this too? Which is bad news in itself. But, this is just like an unbelievable angle on the, well, not unbelievable at all. I absolutely believe it. Someone told it to me once, and I jumped right on it and said, yeah, that's probably true. He's always struck me as that kind of guy from afar, right? All that we see through of him through the media makes it pretty easy to believe he is that kind of guy. I mean, we've been hearing stories about him for a long time now. As we mentioned, he's kind of a child of privilege. And I think I'll interrupt things with a little bit of the warm tea this morning. There's my utter shock and disbelief at the Matt Gaetz story has encouraged the frog in the throat this morning. So a little sound effects that you can enjoy for the that feeling of morning intimacy as we sit over coffee and tea and discuss the news. Anyway, stories we've heard in the past about Gaetz include, his drunk driving conviction and his ability to essentially get off scot-free on these things by virtue of his politically powerful dad. But that I thought I had heard this story in the past too, that he and several young male state legislators back when he was in the Florida legislature used to compare sexual conquests, I guess, or whatever, I don't know, to one another, and that they had a game among themselves, not the guess how old she is game, because they all were just barely old enough to be in the legislatures themselves. And, so I guess it didn't have the same impact. But that they had a point system. They rated one another's girls, and so I guess some of them actually had sex with full-grown women, I guess. I don't know. And there was a point system based on, I guess on hotness, but also on extra points for if they worked for you or if they were a lobbyist or a staffer or an intern. And, he's super gross and disgusting. And where did I see this one? Maybe one of these stories will stumble across, mentioned in one of these articles, that last time they moved offices, once he was in Congress, when they were moving offices at the end of the last Congress, cleaning out their offices and they had garbage cans and dumpsters outside of everybody's office, cleaning out the junk before you moved, and that atop the large dumpster full of garbage outside of Matt Gaetz's office was what somebody described as a Costco-sized empty box of condoms, but like one of those Trojan bear skin or whatever the hell they would call these things. Just like a super lewd kind of condom to be throwing out there, and he couldn't be any dumber unless he had thrown out, extra large size. He's just buying cartons of them and throwing them out the window and then putting the box out there to look really cool. Anyway, let's run through the stories that I collected on him and that Greg has sent my way. Feds looking at alleged payments that Representative Matt Gaetz made to women and online solicitation, according to sources. This is, I think, the source of his dodge that he's built on elusive terminology here. I think that allows him to, allows him to make this excuse, except it's really honestly an excuse that's just, you never want to utter these words because you're just, it's the ultimate, if you're explaining your losing play, of having your congressional office communications director issue the statement, Matt Gaetz has never paid for sex. It's just like, you lose. The end. It's I don't know how you escape that. Anyway, we'll get to that in a second. Subheader here from ABC News. Gaetz previously denied having a relationship with a 17-year-old. That also a bad denial. A lot of bylines, a lot of names in the byline here. Alexander Malin, Mike Levine, John Santucci, Catherine Falders, and Will Staken. I don't know whether it's steak like it's steak like Steak. It could be Steakin. I don't know. I'll ask him if I ever meet him. All right. The video here is, I guess, unrelated and has been on my screen for a while. It's rolling this other stuff that it's just funny to see because they've moved on to another story in the video. And there is, it's not funny video. It's just funny juxtaposition. It's video from the trial of Derek Chauvin, who killed George Floyd, and it's video of one of the witnesses, tearing up and crying over this thing. But as I look up, I see he's shaking his head and burying his head in his hands as I'm reading the headline of this story of feds looking at alleged payments Gates made to women. And, it was, I don't know, serendipitous, but we'll move on from there. The federal investigation targeting Republican Representative Matt Gaetz is specifically looking into whether he and an associate in his home state of Florida, we know who that is already, provided cash or other things of value to women or girls they had sex with after connecting online, the New York Times first reported Thursday evening, and a source familiar with the matter confirmed to ABC News. Gates' associate, former local politician Joel Greenberg, was indicted last year for allegedly trafficking a teenage girl for sex in 2017. And the Justice Department is also trying to determine whether Gates had sex with the same 17-year-old, I guess. According to sources, Greenberg pleaded not guilty to the charges. The details of the investigation were first reported by the New York Times 2 days after the paper revealed that an investigation was underway. The disclosure has sent shockwaves. Yes, shockwaves through Republican circles, particularly among close associates of former President Donald Trump, who considered Gates a staunch ally and a loyal friend. Probably did. Gates probably thought being a staunch ally and loyal friend of Donald Trump was a good idea for a number of reasons, not the least of which was he wanted a piece of Trump world sex cult. Remember, we used to talk about that quite a lot in the early days of the Trump era, and it's come back because it was always true. What do you know? Gates' office did not respond to a request for comment, but earlier this week, Gates insisted on Fox News that he never, quote, had a relationship with a 17-year-old, unquote, calling such allegations, quote, totally false. And then the big loser line comes up after this paragraph. According to the Times, investigators believe Greenberg met women through certain websites, well, gee whiz, and introduced some of them to Gates. As recently as 2019 and 2020, that would be pretty recent, Gates and Greenberg told women to meet them at hotels in Florida, laying out how much they were willing to pay beforehand, the newspaper said, adding that party drugs may also have been used by Gates and others at times. And now the loser line, Matt Gaetz has never paid for sex, Gates' office said in a statement to the New York Times. Matt Gaetz refutes all the disgusting allegations completely. Some of them ain't so disgusting. Wonk, wonk, wop, wop. Okay, yeah. All right. They're all disgusting, but Matt Gaetz thinks they're really cool. So those ones are probably true, but the disgusting ones, I don't know. Anyway, Matt Gaetz has never, ever been on any such websites whatsoever. Matt Gaetz cherishes the relationships in his past and looks forward to marrying the love of his life. That might be on the rocks. We'll check in on that at some point. And remember, the current love of his life is a woman that, again, he got engaged to at Pervalago, which, by itself doesn't necessarily say anything, except, again, Gates spending far too much time at Pervalago. And remember, he represents the Florida Panhandle. They are not close together. All right, so yes, it's in Florida, and yes, he can, make his way there if he decides to drive, and there's reasons for him to be there. He gets laid there a lot, or whatever. But there's always the promise of some sort of new illicit sex if he hangs out at Mar-a-Lago, plus also power for his proximity to the president. And yeah, he'd absolutely drag his sorry ass there all the time and make use of the various fringe benefits. But just wanted to point that out if you had forgotten about that. So yeah, the elusive language. What's going on here, and they explain it, I think, later on in the article, is that they're dealing in, I guess, sugar daddy type sites. I don't know what they call the places, but the basics of the arrangement are, it's like a dating site of sorts, except the dates are sex for money. So, but the thing is, it's set up so that it's never exactly sex for money, because that just gets you landed in jail for prostitution charges. So the other thing, the way it works apparently, is the women, and I guess in this case sometimes girls, who I am sure are trying to pretend that they're women, because almost certainly the site says, hey now, no underage people, right? Don't come on here saying you're younger than 18, because we can't have that. That's illegal and we won't do it. So whatever you do, don't say that you're under 18, because then that would be bad. And they go on and they basically, put up a profile with pictures and everything, and essentially name their price and say, what are the things, either sometimes they use like an Amazon wish list or whatever, but like what's his name? What was his name? Duke Cunningham and his bribe menu. There are certain things which, if you provide them through online payment systems like PayPal or the Cash App or whatever, I'll agree to meet you, and then, hey, we'll see what happens. I mean, I'll meet you in a room with a bed in it, and, maybe we'll play backgammon. If you bring backgammon, then that's one of the things we can do. So that allows you to do things like, well, I never paid for sex. I paid for travel and hotel rooms and gifts. But that's because, as he's actually tried to pull the, like, well, I'm a sensitive lover kind of a thing. I'm just a generous boyfriend. I'll give you gifts if you will drive to Florida and meet me in a hotel. And if you bring backgammon, I'll throw the backgammon set out the window, but then I'll buy you a new one later to make up for it. So in addition, there's also this story about his having this other weird game. Let me read on in the article from ABC News. A lawyer for Greenberg, that's the other guy caught up in the scandal who everybody thinks flipped on him, did not respond to ABC News for a request for comment, so who cares, right? Move on. Served a controversial stint as Seminole County tax collector. You remember all of that. Prior to joining Congress, Gates was a member of the Florida House of Representatives when his father was also a member of the Florida Senate. I think I had that backwards. Sources told ABC News the two were often referred to as Daddy Gates and Baby Gates. Sources said some women referred to him as Creepy Gates because they allegedly found themselves made uncomfortable by the junior lawmaker. I would venture to say that there are probably a few that thought Daddy was creepy too, but who knows? Maybe he was an upstanding guy. Sources said Gates was part of a group of young male lawmakers who created a game, in scare quotes, to score their female sexual conquests, which no points for the guys? All right, well, which granted points for various targets such as interns, staffers, or other female colleagues in the state house. One of the targets of the scoring system was a group the lawmakers had heard were, quote, virgins, according to a source. The scoring system by male Florida lawmakers was previously reported by the Miami Herald, so I believe that we had actually heard about this. I wonder if I would recognize the article. It's linked in here. So anyway, I need to move on, though, to get to the other salacious details. But that one source said Gates was often spotted trying to pick up young women at 101 Restaurant, a once popular watering hole in Tallahassee for some lawmakers and students from nearby Florida State University. Gates' office did not respond to a request for comment. Really? Because the other time they were asked for comment, they said, Matt Gates does not pay for sex. During an interview on Fox News, Gates claimed he was being extorted, remember that, over the investigation, and claimed that someone had alleged there were, quote, pictures of me with child prostitutes, which he said was, quote, obviously false. There will be no such pictures because no such thing happened. But really, on March 16th, when this got going from the extortion standpoint, Gates said, that sounds like an unfinished sentence. And we know such pictures because no such thing happened. But really, on March 16th was when this got going from the extortion standpoint. Okay. All right. Well, certainly makes some sense. Not as a dodge, but as a sentence. Anyway, I was wondering, though, whether or not the allegation that he was showing nude pictures to fellow lawmakers meant he was doing that in the Florida State House or whether that was something that he was doing in Congress. And I think the article that Greg sent me from Daily Beast, Republicans waste no time burying meanest person Matt Gaetz after teen sex allegation, Jamie Ross's piece, actually goes ahead and says, no, yeah, that was actually something he was doing in Congress as well. So he didn't drop that habit in between the state house and moving up to Congress. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That's actually in a different piece entitled Matt Gaetz Shared Sex Partners Nudes on House Floor, report. And be careful. I mean, which colon are we talking about? Punctuation, yes, doesn't show up in any of the pictures. Just want to make sure you know that. But subheader says sleazy stuff. Blake Montgomery reporting that one for the Daily Beast. Matt Gaetz showed images and videos of nude women he was sleeping with to aides and fellow lawmakers in the Capitol and even on the House floor, CNN reports. I guess that still doesn't necessarily make it entirely clear until it gets around to saying former House Speaker Paul Ryan's staff reportedly met with him and lectured him about behaving professionally on the House floor. Wow. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, here we go. We are back on the air. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Comment from comedian and Trump imitator extraordinaire J.L. Cauvin. Is that how he pronounces it? I don't know. Cauvin, if you want to follow him on Twitter. He does an amazing, I think probably one of the best Trump impressions going. Not only it sounds like him, but he's got a lot of the things going for him. Facial expressions. But also he can script it very well. But he just making the comment here. I'm going to have to save that one. Matt Gaetz coming to CBS this fall in Young Epstein. Young Epstein, of course, because Einstein. But yeah, the joke suffers in the reading aloud. But I enjoyed it anyway. All right, so we'll share that with everybody. And what the hell? We'll share it now because he deserves the kudos for it. Let's see. Oh, there's some new-ish stuff. Molly Jong Fast is saying, whoa, as Noah Shachtman tweets out, these text messages led the feds to Matt Gaetz. So I'm going to have to open that one up, too. The Daily Beast just absolutely killing it this morning with their reporting. Greg sent me, as I mentioned, the other article, the one he meant for me to read, was up at the top, but you know how maybe you're familiar with it. Daily Beast has that sort of scroll feature that it's an endless scroll of, I don't know whether it's all Matt Gaetz stories or just everything that they're doing so that you stay addicted to their page and keep reading their things. Let's see. Was there more to the one he sent? The one he was pointing to was, about Republicans being glad that he was on his way out. But I was in the middle of reading Blake Montgomery's piece just about his past behavior that sort of helps explain why he's on the outs. Although I should mention, how about if I do mention, I think I just saw the Rude Pundit tweeting, no, Jeff Tiedrich, who's tweeting, kudos to the 0 brave Republicans now calling for Matt Gaetz to resign. We've got some real profiles and courage here. And I did see somebody else, mentioning this, say, in comparison to what's going on with Cuomo. Like, remember all the Republicans were saying, how come all the Democrats aren't calling on Cuomo to resign? And then Democrats began calling on Cuomo to resign. And then Republicans reacted to that by saying, how come no Democrats are calling on Cuomo to resign? And now, interestingly, no Republicans calling on, now literally, actually true this time to say, nobody's calling on Matt Gaetz so far to resign. Instead, it's just been statements of, I believe Matt Gaetz, although most famously that came immediately from Jim Jordan, who, no track record on being truthful about scandals involving the sexual perversions and assaults of those around him. It's kind of a habit of his. Anyway, let me read about his behavior in Congress in years past, right? Matt Gaetz showed images and videos of nude women he was sleeping with to aides and fellow lawmakers in the Capitol and even on the House floor, CNN reports, which I think that's against House rules. They just say don't show the nudes on the House floor, don't pass out lobbyist checks on the House floor, don't show the nudes, etc. One video reportedly depicted a nude woman with a hula hoop, which, I don't know what to say. I mean, I guess once you get to the nude part, it's like, and she had a hula hoop. Wow. I mean, honestly, if you started that sentence, and you'll never believe it, she's nude in the video and she has and I'm like, oh my God, what? Hula hoop. You know what? Honestly, that's very wholesome sounding compared to what I thought you were going to say, which I have no idea, but there are 10,000 things that tend to show up in nude videos of people that are worse than hula hoops, I guess, in terms of getting yourself in trouble. I mean, it's like, do what you want in the video, I guess. But one, don't give it to Matt Gaetz in any sense of the word. And two, whatever. Good luck to you. I don't know. Enough with this. So she had a hula hoop, which I guess is, I don't know. Like I said, that's almost like the wholesome side of suggestive. I don't know what to say. Who knows what she's doing with the hula hoop? I don't know. If she's just using it as a hula hoop, terrific. Honestly, not a whole lot I can think of, but I'm not that imaginative when it comes to this sort of thing in the morning. So, all right. Moreover, there's more. Moreover, during Gaetz's first term, former House Speaker Paul Ryan's staff reportedly had hula hoops. No, they met with the freshman representative and lectured him about behaving professionally on the House floor. And the shocking part is they said, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. And, less hula hoops, more, whatever. In your videos, please. We want the really hot stuff. Gaetz is currently under investigation over an alleged relationship with a 17-year-old girl, which I'm wondering, are we supposed to guess that, like, the girl had the hula hoop? Probably not, but I don't know. Whatever, maybe. Anyway, had an alleged relationship, and that, too, is elusive language. Like, what is this relationship, really? For one thing, it can't happen because she's 17. For another, is it from a sugar daddy date app? That's not a relationship. Anyway, whatever. Authorities believe this involved him paying for the minor to travel with him, potentially violating federal sex trafficking laws. I mean, it outright violates them. It's just a question of, did he actually do this thing? But this, too, is part of the problem with him and his elusive language. He's a dumb guy. So it was probably pretty easy for this, jackass he's involved with, not the girl, but the guy, the Seminole County tax collector, whose name I already forget. It was probably pretty easy to convince Gaetz, well, because you're not paying for sex, you're paying for things like hotel rooms and dinners and hula hoops, I guess, you're not directly engaging. It's not prostitution. You can say I never paid for sex, and I guess you could call it a relationship or whatever if you want to. It's a business relationship, but the idea is that the people on the thing are supposed to be A, of age, and B, doing this willingly. And if they're not, it doesn't excuse everything. Like my friend told me it was all going to be okay because we use this website. You still have to, be making these deals with people of legal age. I could see him overlooking that part, or thinking, I'm in Congress, I can make this go away. I'm a very powerful guy. Anyway, the Florida Republican denies the allegations. The probe germinated from an inquiry into close political ally of Gates, who's now in jail awaiting trial on charges of sex trafficking, which is a pretty good indication. Don't listen to that guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's in jail awaiting trial on charges of sex trafficking. I should have taken that into account, that the things he was telling me to do might involve sex trafficking. The investigation may be welcome to some on Capitol Hill. Republican lawmakers told the Daily Beast they have long waited for a Gates scandal to break. Now it's linked to a story that is, where is it? Elsewhere. Republican, I knew it. I knew I saw the title somewhere. Another Daily Beast piece. Republicans have been waiting for a Matt Gaetz scandal to break. I'm just sort of curious about what scandal they thought was going to break. I know it's in pocket somewhere. I recognize the picture they used to illustrate this thing. Matt Fuller and Sam Brody reporting here. The Florida congressman's less than sterling reputation among his colleagues has many Republicans questioning the wisdom of jumping to his defense. And yet people are doing that. Let me see if we can hit the highlights here. Republicans on and off Capitol Hill on Wednesday night largely keeping their mouths shut. Gates, the Trump-loving, Fox News grinning 38-year-old Florida Republican, has a less than sterling reputation among his congressional colleagues. More than half a dozen lawmakers have spoken to these reporters about his love of alcohol and illegal drugs, as well as his proclivity for younger women. It's well known among Republican lawmakers that Gates was dating a college student, one over the age of consent, in 2018. And guess what? She came to Washington as an intern, as college students will sometimes do, but usually without the sleeping with the congressman. Well, I don't know. Maybe. I imagine it's at least the bare majority of them probably not doing that. In response to these allegations and a question about whether he'd ever had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old while in Congress, very specific, Gates told the Daily Beast late Wednesday night, the last time I had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old, I was 17. As for the Hill, I know I have many enemies and few friends. My support generally lies outside of Washington, D.C., and I wouldn't have it any other way. He's so smooth. As for his few friends in Washington, the Daily Beast found that to be true. One former GOP staffer said Wednesday that their office had an informal rule not to allow their member to appear next to Gates during TV hits, fearful of the inevitable scandal that would come out one day. On Tuesday, it might finally have dropped. According to the New York Times, Gates is under investigation by the Justice Department. You know the story, the 17-year-old, da-da-da-da-da. I'm not yada-yadaing it. We've been over it. Let's see. He's openly admitted that he's paid for flights and hotels for women to visit him. I've been, generous as a partner, right? Oh, so suave. Now, Gates may be finding generosity in short supply among his colleagues. Only two House Republicans jumped to his defense on Wednesday. That would be Jim Jordan, who himself has been accused of turning a blind eye to sexual assault, and lunatic a-hole Marjorie Taylor Greene, who released her exercise/medical emergency video yesterday, lifting weights. She's very strong. It's good for her. And then doing pull-ups on an electrified defibrillator bar, apparently. Sent her wiggling across the screen like a fish, but okay. And she also, they note here, has repeatedly boosted the QAnon conspiracy theory, accusing Democrats of abusing children. So that's kind of interesting, too. While Green compared the Gates allegations to a witch hunt, that tried and true line, and the conspiracy theories and lies like Trump-Russia collusion, Jordan was more muted, if you can believe it. I believe Matt Gaetz, was all he said in his statement. GOP aides noted to the Daily Beast that Jordan has been one of Gates' closest allies in Congress, and the most he would offer was a tepid statement and the support for Gates staying on the Judiciary Committee. More importantly, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy wasn't exactly jumping into Gates' corner. McCarthy said on Fox News he wanted to wait for the facts before meting out any punishment, like removing Gates from committees, like that other lunatic. But the GOP leader also offered that if it comes out to be true, yes, we would remove him. Those are serious implications. They're allegations. But okay, the implications of the allegations are also serious. It was not surprising to some observers that the wagons didn't circle around Gates in the explosive 24 hours after the scandal, even as the congressman produced documents that lent some weight to his extortion claims. We should check into those, I guess. I don't think a lot of people are going to go out of their way to defend him, especially with this outlandish-sounding defense, one GOP staffer said. I don't think you'll find a lot of people who are desperate to keep him involved in Republican politics. The cartoonishly scandalous perception of Gates is so commonplace. How commonplace is it? So commonplace that sometimes it's visible literally in the halls of Congress. A Hill source sent the Daily Beast a photo of the trash bin. There we are. So outside Gates' office, they're clearing out the offices. On top of the heap, an empty Costco-sized box of bearskin Trojan condoms. The most salacious-sounding kind of condom, I guess. The richest, most aromatic kind of... All right, whatever. Well, While he's openly courted a number of women in Washington, Gates has not exactly made it a priority to court fellow lawmakers since arriving in Congress in 2017. He even wears his reluctance to win friends and influence GOP lawmakers as a badge of honor. And he also wears bearskin Trojan condoms as a badge of honor, I guess. Blah, blah, blah. He's a jackass. He does actively socialize. One person he does actively socialize with is the 45th president, also a perv from Florida. He proved quick to defend Donald Trump at nearly every opportunity. Now this is interesting. But even quicker to criticize his GOP colleagues for insufficient Trump support. At the same time, he's also run afoul of Trump. He was reportedly iced out of the White House in 2020 when he backed a resolution curbing the president's ability to wage war with Iran after Democrats said they would give Gates a vote on one of his amendments if he would support the overall war powers bill. What a dummy. He should have lied and not done it. Anyway, so they were mad with him at that point. Let's see. Loves being on TV, loves to self-promote, etc., etc. It goes on for a while, and I suppose you should all read it for background. The weekend's coming, after all. Now, the one that Greg pointed to is a short blurb, and I think we can fit it in and then move on to more serious subjects. Maybe. The one about... meanest person. Like, what makes him so mean? Hours after it was reported that federal investigators are investigating Matt Gaetz for why, his Republican colleagues could barely disguise their glee. Speaking to Business Insider, a string of anonymous GOPers jumped on the chance to unload on Gaetz as he faces a scandal that could abruptly end his political career. That'd be great. One former senior Trump White House aide described Gaetz as the meanest person in politics, and said other ex-Trump aides feel a little vindicated by the news. A former congressional aide said Republican leaders will enjoy sitting back and watching Gaetz completely employed in a matter of days, while another ex-Trump White House aide wrote, wow, Trump people, good riddance. It sounds like he let whatever BS power he thought he had go to his head. Gaetz has denied the allegations, claiming he's the victim of an extortion plot masterminded by a former Justice Department official. And I do think I put aside something about what he thinks the conspiracy actually is and who's involved in it. And I'm not certain whether it's worth going through. Is it in this one? Is it the New York Times piece? Or is that more about the scandal itself? If I recall correctly, the conspiracy theory about the extortion plot. Is that not mentioned in here? I'm pretty sure I read some significant details about it. Was that, here we are. It is in a New York Times piece, down at the bottom here. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry to announce that it turns out that Gates went not only to Florida State University, but got his law degree at William and Mary Law School here in Virginia. What a disaster. Well, maybe they'll revoke it. But on to this other subject. Gates has sought to divert attention from the Justice Department investigation by claiming that he and his father were targets of an extortion plot by two men trying to secure funding for a separate venture. The men, Robert Kent, a former Air Force intelligence officer who runs a consulting business, and Stephen Alford, a real estate developer, oh no, in Florida? Wow. Who has been convicted of fraud, oh no, really, approached Mr. Gates' father, Don Gates, about funding their efforts to locate Robert A. Levinson, an American hostage held in Iran. They suggested to Don Gates that Mr. Levinson's successful return could somehow be used to secure a pardon for Matt Gates if he were charged with federal crimes, according to a copy of their proposal provided to the Times, which honestly, it is a little weird and sleazy and would raise eyebrows anywhere, I guess, and maybe it was supposed to. But what an interesting reveal into, you know, the insider world of Matt Gates, like that you could seal the deal. If it wasn't good enough, I want you to fund my rescue of somebody being held hostage by Iran, which is a crazy enough idea as it is. But we can sweeten it by saying, I think if we're successful, we can get Trump to pardon Matt. Like, that's common enough knowledge, like he's going to need a pardon for something, is troubling all by itself. Anyway, soon after, Don Gates hired a lawyer and contacted the FBI. I mean, that's actually the only smart thing in this whole story. Matt Gates said his father wore a wire, which he shouldn't just blab about, and taped a meeting and a telephone conversation with Mr. Alford. An email exchange between Don Gates' lawyer and the Justice Department provided to the Times appears to confirm he was generally cooperating with the FBI as it looked into his claims. Mr. Kent denied the Gates' assertions. He said he heard rumors that Matt Gates might be under investigation and mentioned them only to sweeten his proposal. So it was a stretch and a dumb idea, but that's what he's saying anyway. I told him I'm not trying to extort, which is usually an indication. Well, at least you know that it could sound like that. But if this were true, he might be interested in doing something good, Mr. Kent said in an interview, which is an amazing thing to say about a guy who's, you know, as much of a joke as his career has been, has had a career in elective politics. He's been in the Florida House of Representatives and now is in the United States Congress. And it's like, well, I'm offering you a chance to do something good for a change, you know? Like, you better do something good because you'll need it when it comes time for needing a pardon for sex trafficking or whatever you get caught on. Drugs, drunk driving, whatever you might need a pardon for. What a statement. And to say, you know, you're going to need something good on your record to help you get a pardon. Like, usually you say, well, my record of public service in Congress and the Florida House of Representatives. Yeah, we know. We heard about that. Have you done anything good while you were there? Last year, the Trump administration notified the family of Mr. Levinson, a former FBI agent, that he had died while in captivity in Iran, where he disappeared in 2007 while on an unauthorized mission for the CIA. Didn't sound good. But some people involved with the Levinson case continued to believe that he might still be alive, including Mr. Kent. He was stunned when he heard that Matt Gates had sought to tie the Justice Department investigation to an extortion plot related to the Levinson case. He threw Levinson and the entire Levinson family under the bus, Kent said. I can't imagine what these poor people have been through. This guy, to divert attention to himself, has raked up the attention to the family. Don Gates also taped a phone call and a meeting with David McGee, a Levinson family lawyer, where they discussed the rescue proposal. In an interview, McGee denied any involvement and suggested Matt Gates was conflating the matter inappropriately with his own potential criminal liability. He's trying to distract attention from a pending tidal wave that is about to sink his ship, Mr. McGee said. So that's pretty interesting. all by itself. Let's see. And then there was one other item that I saw go by on Twitter, and I opened it up. Right, the text messages. I really didn't mean to spend this much time on it, but I have a feeling it's going to be the subject of much discussion over the weekend. Jose Paglieri, I guess, Pagliery, reporting this also for the Daily Beast. It's like the Daily Beast radio show. These text messages led the feds to Matt Gaetz. I am curious to find out what they might be. In late January 2020, U.S. Secret Service agents, received information that Gaetz had accompanied a Florida county tax official, we know who, accompanied who they were already investigating, on an unusual nighttime visit to a government office where the local official was allegedly making fake IDs. A source close to the investigation told the Daily Beast. That tip to the feds came in a text message conversation that Seminole County tax collector Joel Greenberg had with an employee, explaining why they were both in the office one weekend 2 years earlier, according to this person. That's unusual. Why would you admit to stuff like that? I have no clear idea. Okay, a timestamp visible in the text message thread indicated the conversation took place Monday, April 16th, 2018. So it's coming up on 3 years ago. According to three people with direct knowledge of the incident, Greenberg visited the Lake Mary, Florida branch of his tax collection agency that weekend. Grainy surveillance footage, again, upgrade the surveillance cameras these days. Cameras on your phones are better than this. Grainy footage captured Greenberg standing near a manager's desk with another man. Greenberg forgot to set the alarm on the way out, which concerned the assistant branch manager when she walked into the office Monday morning. Careless as well. The employee was surprised to find that driver's licenses, which are normally turned in when expired at the tax office for shredding, were now scattered all over the desk instead of in the appropriate disposal basket. She reviewed the camera footage and alerted her boss, who in turn contacted Greenberg via text. Did you happen to visit the Lake Mary office on the weekend? The message read. The image obtained by the Daily Beast shows that Greenberg allegedly responded, "Yes, I was showing Congressman Gaetz what our operation looked like. Did I leave something on?" Yeah, you left the evidence out. When Greenberg later came under investigation by the Secret Service for identity theft and stalking, agents approached former employees at the tax office to obtain proof of the public official's activities. That's when they were suddenly directed to Gaetz. Aha! So that's pretty interesting. According to the source who provided the text message conversation, who spoke on condition of anonymity to guarantee their safety, Secret Service agents directed them in the final days of January 2020 to print out the full text message conversation with Greenberg from online AT&T records. That source said those text messages were delivered to the Secret Service, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and most recently another federal agency. Gaetz, you know who he is, target of Justice Department investigation. You know about Greenberg, recruiting young women, paid them for sex, but not really. CNN first reported the existence of the text messages on Thursday. The Orlando Sentinel confirmed their existence as well. Daily Beast attempted to file a public records request to obtain copies of the video surveillance believed to show Gaetz with Greenberg that weekend. However, a Seminole County representative indicated that the video is unavailable because the government agency has a policy of deleting all surveillance footage after 60 days. Could quite possibly be true. What else have we got here? They attempted to contact the former employee who interacted with Greenberg via text message but was unsuccessful. That employee eventually signed a $50,000 settlement with the Office of the Tax Collector over claims of unfair retaliation at work, after Greenberg allegedly used a circle of personal friends he hired at the agency to harass and intimidate her and her family. What a gem this guy is. The settlement bars her from false or defamatory statements about her former employee, but importantly, doesn't prevent her from speaking to government investigators, according to a copy obtained by the Daily Beast. So it's not looking good. But now I guess we get the general idea of things, and I'm sure then the Secret Service was saying, what was he doing here? Probably making fake IDs. And what's the deal with Gaetz being there and getting involved in this? And we ought to look into it because this is illegal in its own right and probably good. It would be great compromise, certainly, if a foreign power were to fall into possession of this information. Anyway, hey, it's just a little weird. Now, there's more in here, and let's see. Yeah, mostly about Greenberg and the way he was bothering people and stalking people. Look at this. Actually, there's a story down here. We might as well finish up the segment here without laying the groundwork for talking to Arliss Bunny, but I think we can make that jump over pretty quick. And Greenberg has maintained a close relationship with Gates for several years. Both were rising stars in Florida's Republican Party in 2016. They've taken selfies together, and also with Roger Stone in 2017, at AIPAC in 2018, the White House in 2019, because the perv in chief doesn't mind having these idiots hanging around the White House. Gates publicly lent his support to Greenberg, cheering him as a disruptor who should run for Congress. On top of all that. All right. They were also together in the Florida Panhandle region on July 4th, 2019, when they called a state legislator, Representative Anna V. Escamani, and left her a peculiar voice message that has been obtained by the Daily Beast. And it's here, and the SoundCloud recording of it is available, and you can listen to it. We'll run out of time before we have to take off for our break. My dear Anna, this is your favorite tax collector, like Trump. I'm up in the Panhandle with your favorite U.S. Congressman, Mr. Gates, Greenberg starts to say in this message. Hi, Anna, Gates jumps in. And we were just chatting about you and talking about your lovely qualities, Greenberg continued. We think you're the future of the Democratic Party in Florida, Gates said. On Thursday, Escamani told the Daily Beast that she maintained Greenberg at arm's length for years. Their interaction started when she called him out over Islamophobic comments, then helped him connect with the Muslim community to recover from that. Escamani said she cautiously entertained weird contacts from him. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Cut off not only by my own break, but by interrupted once again by Pepe the Frog jumping back into the throat here. But you should hear about this. I think, again, this is taking me a lot longer to get through the story because it's, complicated and weird and gross because that's the kind of guy Matt Gaetz is. But here's what I was trying to cram in at the end here. So they make this very weird, creepy call to this woman that they're harassing. She's a member of the Florida House of Representatives who has called out Greenberg on his Islamophobia and tried to actually connect him with a group that might be able to help him talk through it and get out of it. And so instead, he thanks her by getting another pervert on the phone and calling her and making weird, perverted calls to her. She was saying, though, that she has maintained him at arm's length for years. Their interaction started when she called him out over the Islamophobia. And Escamani said she cautiously entertained, quote, weird contacts from Greenberg and Gates that made her uncomfortable. We were not friends. We never hung out. We didn't talk ever, really. I just played nice. For so many women, you're either very blunt and be called a bitch, or you try to play nice and pivot and deflate, she said. And she uncovers a whole other area of inquiry there that's not explored in this article, and we could probably spend another 6 years on. But an amazing story. And you can see why he has no Republican allies of any consequence. He's a pathetic figure, like one of those people who's been begging to be caught and admonished for years, and I guess good, now it's happening. Hooray, his wish has come true, and hopefully we'll be rid of him soon. And what could be better than Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene jumping to his defense? Only if they are capable of embarrassment, that's what would be happening now. But I guess they're not, so I guess we'll miss out on that treat. Okay, and now we can pivot to something, I guess, a little bit more serious. I had a whole thing planned where we would be talking about the infrastructure plan and what's in it. I'll direct you to a New York Times piece on that. And of course, a piece from the front page over at Daily Kos, and there are several of them. actually a good resource for a place to start if you want to run through the elements in the package. I was taking a look at Hunter's piece, the news roundup from last night, Infrastructure Week, Georgia's corporate backlash, and police new U.S. Capitol was target. There's lots in there. That's the title of the piece. But just on infrastructure, there's a list of several pieces of importance on this. And Joan has a piece laying out some of the key elements that are in there under the title of Biden touts a once-in-a-generation investment in America in his infrastructure plan unveiling. And as we know, the price tag has come out, and I think it actually came in a lot lower than people were talking about. And in recent days, people have been throwing around numbers like $5 trillion, and we're in the $2 trillion range now, which I wonder whether that's an acknowledgement by some of the old bulls of the Congress, and I can't really call them economic hardliners per se, but people who still worry about being attacked for, well, how do you plan to pay for it? Which brings us to the topic of second hour's discussion, actually, with Arliss Bunny, who is here waiting patiently for me to finish the Matt Gaetz story. Thank you for joining us, Arliss. And I would like to, I guess, get to the subject of, okay, big price tag on the infrastructure plan. We all know that we need it, but eventually we're going to all be asked the how do you pay for it question. And over the couple of years that you've been explaining modern monetary theory to us, it's become clearer every day that question, especially if we choose to actually, even without fully, latching on to modern monetary theory, this is a power that we can take away from Republicans to defeat important investments simply by asking this stupid question of how are you going to pay for it, and whether you go all the way and say, I'm confident in saying we don't need to, or you find some other way of distancing yourself from the pressure that comes from that question. I think it's a good thing. So I hope you're up to a wide-ranging discussion and explanation on this.
I am ready to go.
You're ready
to hop on it.
All right. Excellent. This is a big month for you, by the way, right?
Yes, in fact, Sunday, very, very big day. Lots of eggs to deliver, places to go, things to do.
Sure. Okay. So I'm glad you could take time away from this. This is like trying to talk to an accountant before the 15th.
Yes, on the 14th of April. Yes. Yeah. So here's the thing. When somebody says, how are you going to pay for that? They're asking the wrong question. Because, yes, there are constraints in the economy. Absolutely. There are constraints, but they aren't how you're going to pay for that. They aren't on the financial side. They're on the resources side, always on the resources side. Do we have enough labor in the labor market? And if not, how do we get it? I.e. immigration, but that's another argument, sure. But fact is we need immigration, blah, blah. But so there's the labor constraint, always. And then the other constraint are resources in terms of physical resources. Do we have the physical materials? So for instance, during the shutdown, my company was able to, I own a manufacturing company, and yes, right. The family members that work in my company were able to continue working because our county health people decided that because we were family, we could work. Okay. That was great because orders were absolutely flooding through the door. We were buried in orders, but we had no labor, in other words, my employees are all at home. Yeah. And not only that, I couldn't get materials because my suppliers were all shut down. That is a constraint. That's constraint. That's what constraint looks like. So when we can't get what we need in order to be able to do what we do, that's a real constraint. That's real world constraint. What deficit? When you hear people talk about deficit, federal deficit, what they're talking about is an illusionary problem. So they are making an illusionary problem more important than a real problem. And we have a lot of real problems in this world. The biggest one being climate change, but right behind that, poverty and child poverty. The wealth gap is a huge, real problem because if nothing else, of the way it affects democracy. And, inequality and inequity and all of those things, those are real problems.
Of course. Yes.
Deficit, completely an illusionary problem. And it was created almost out of thin air by Ronald Reagan. And he created this giant suck. It's the Democrats can't have nice things suck. And we have to change the way we speak because we fell into that suckiness, basically. And we have to, as I've been calling it lately, fight the suck. And the way you fight the suck is that every time somebody says, how are you going to pay for that? You remind them that the federal government is an issuer of sovereignty. And Stephanie Kelton, in her book, the book everyone should read, called The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton, please, everyone go out and buy it. What she says in her very first chapter is don't think of a household. Okay. And this is absolutely true. Because a household can't, create, in other words, you have a problem with debt and deficit. I have a problem with debt and deficit. Businesses have a debt and deficit. That can be a threat to them. States can't issue currency, so that it is a limit to them. And in fact, even if you are a country in the euro region, you are limited. You are not an issuer of your own currency. So every time somebody tries to compare us to the economy of Greece, first of all, the stupidity of that is staggering to me. Right. But secondly, it's simply an incorrect comparison. It's like comparing turtles to dogs. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah, well, because of the ability to issue currency, right? Okay,
that's right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes all the difference. And the big mistake, the biggest, I think, single mistake, the thing that Reagan sold us, that we bought and chomped down on hard, every Democrat, all the way to even Bernie Sanders, who says these things too. And I feel bad about that because he has come so far down the path. But the concept that we should be seeing the financial and monetary system from the federal side, we shouldn't. We need to be seeing the monetary system from our side of the ledger. In other words, what matters is how healthy the economy is, not how healthy zeros are on a computer screen in the federal, at the Fed. What does that matter?
I guess, I mean, I understand the old way of thinking that you think, well, the economy is described by those numbers. So the healthier they are, the more confidence that might instill in, the players in the investment game or whatever. Certainly the last couple of decades has probably convinced us that investment on Wall Street rarely has anything to do with whether or not everybody in the economy is doing well. It just
that's right.
They don't correlate.
That's right. And the government. So people fret about Social Security running out of money. The federal government cannot run out of money. If you can make a keystroke on the keyboard in front of you at the Fed, and you are one of the people that is an issuer of currency, you can issue that money into Social Security as long as it is authorized by Congress. There is not a limitation on that side. The limitation is the resource side. Are we overheating the economy? So the issue is, are we running up against actual, real constraints? And it is, we all know, subliminally, MMT is not, I should have said this at the top, MMT is not actually an economic theory. And people make that mistake really commonly.
Well, it's in the
MMT
name.
Is a description of the way the monetary system really works. And that we don't understand that we have been taught something else is an education error and possibly a political and power center error. In other words, I think there are power elites who think it's best that we don't understand these things.
Oh, I'm sure.
But, it's to their advantage that we don't get this. So that's part of why this education is so incredibly important. But what MMT is trying to say, and what we really know, is that in the financial crisis, quantitative easing worked. The bank bailout, we had the money for the bank bailout. We've had the money for every modern war. We had the $2.2 trillion for the CARE Act. We had the $900 billion we then turned around and spent in December. We had the $1.9 trillion for the American Rescue Plan. We have however many trillion dollars, and I guarantee you it's not going to be enough, however many trillion dollars that Biden issues into the infrastructure package. Mm-hmm. The fact is that we have a D+ rated infrastructure. The staggering amount of money we can spend into that sector, into those things that would make an enormous difference to the future. And if you want to talk about deficits that our grandchildren will have to pay off, they're not going to pay off zeros on a screen at the Fed because those things don't matter. They're going to pay off what we don't invest now in infrastructure and saving the climate.
Yeah, okay, I can understand that. I mean, those, as you point out, those are real things. I can't get over that bridge. It's closed. I can't live here. It's flooded. Those are real things, whereas I guess the zeros on the screen aren't. And as Greg sometimes explains, even if the zeros say good things like there are, or our screen says there's zero unemployment, but if you are unemployed, that's not true, and it doesn't matter what the screen says. You're not doing well and you can't afford things. That's all you know and that's all you care about.
Exactly. And one of the things that every Democrat should have branded on the or progressive should have branded on the inside of their eyelids is poverty is a policy choice. It is not a lack of our ability to end poverty on the financial side. It is a policy choice. And it's not. That's pretty sobering when you think about it.
We're used to thinking of it in terms of, in rhetorical terms. We'll say, it's terrible that in the richest nation on earth, we can't something. But I guess you don't even have to be the richest nation on earth if you are the issuer of your own currency.
So and if you have the resources. In other words, there are a lot of economies in this world that are resource poor. And so they're constrained very differently than the United States is. We simply are resource, incredibly wealthy in terms of resources.
That's the richness we ought to be thinking of in the richest nation of the world. Okay.
That's exactly right. Ooh, so, that's what we bring to bear. And people talk about modern monetary theory and modern monetary theorists in terms of, well, then we don't need taxes. But that's not true. We do actually need taxes, just not for what people think we need taxes for. We don't need taxes to pay for anything. And for instance, if the federal government issues $100 out into the economy, that appears on their books as a deficit, negative $100.
Okay.
When $100 is paid back in taxes, it wipes out that $100. Negative 100 plus positive 100 is zero.
Right.
Taxes always zero out on the federal ledger. They pay for nothing. They become zero. So taxes never pay for anything. They can't.
I see.
What they do, however, is they create economic churn in the economy. For instance, we all have to work to pay our taxes. Right. So that creates an impetus for an economy to actually function. So that churn is part of the work that taxes do. But we should really be thinking about taxes very differently. And I'm starting I am incredibly encouraged that I am starting to really see this now spoken more in a much more forward way by progressives and Democrats. Mm-hmm. Taxes are a tool, and they are a tool by which you mitigate certain negative forces in the economy. So, for instance, we should be taxing the crap out of the wealthy, not because we need their money. We don't. And if we talk about it as needing their money, we're giving them power they should not be given. They have enough already, frankly. Okay. Thank you very much. We should be taxing the heck out of them, not because we need their money, but because they have enough.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
And because they think of it as, and they speak about it as, we're already paying our share. No, you've already taken more than your share for generations in most cases.
So I was thinking as you were putting it that way, we're not taxing you because we need your money. We're taxing you because you don't.
Yes, and because you're damaging our democracy.
Yeah, I mean, the things that you don't need. Not only do you not need it, you're damaging. Right, as you say, damaging your democracy. You're doing harm with the extra money you're having. If we just let it lay around in your hands when you don't need it, you're not spending it on anything productive. The only obvious use for it is mischief at this point. There's nothing else you can do.
And we can write a tax code that says, if you're using it in these kinds of positive ways, great, do that with it.
Yes.
But if you're not, we're going to tax you back into the dark ages. And the same thing should be true for corporations, because, corporations that are polluting, that are offshoring jobs, that are offshoring money, that are, creating this massive negative force in our economy, they could be doing massive good with that money. And so let's reward them for positive behavior and punish them for negative behavior with the tax code.
That's
what taxes can do for us.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I was saying in a different context yesterday, actually talking about, I think it was Congressman Clyburn's comments about policing and paying for policing, and I guess still trying to get over the negative impact of the fight over using certain words to describe how you might accomplish a more beneficial funding, let's say, of police. Yeah. And saying, look, it's not that we're anti-police, we're pro good cop and anti bad cop. That's easy. That's not it's not hard to imagine. It's not hard to understand. It's very practical. It would be a almost populist approach to paying for policing. We'll pay for the good ones to do the good things and stop paying for the bad ones to do bad things and get rid of them. And the same thing can be done in the tax code. Things that are good for all of us are things we will let you keep and spend this money on. And things that are terrible for all of us, we will try and block from happening by taking that money out of your hands and putting it to better use elsewhere.
It's exactly. And except that we're not putting it to better use elsewhere. We're taking it out of your hands and zeroing it out.
I guess there's that too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's disappearing. But the punishment for federal overspending is never insolvency. The punishment for federal overspending is inflation.
Okay.
So and inflation is, again, resource constraint. And in this world where the economy is so massive and things are so fluid, unless you have a ship stuck in the Suez Canal, my favorite meme from that whole thing was a picture of the Nikkei, the Nikkei board and doing its thing, and it says giant world economy versus sideways ship in the Suez Canal. Who wins?
Yeah.
And it's like, dang. But, we have this big, flexible, creative, worldwide economy. Mm-hmm. And part of this is that economies think of what not just we could do, but think of what economies all over the world could do if they got what I'm saying to you now. In other words, if they understood this about their own economies. And New Zealand has just adopted this.
Oh, yeah, I saw this morning.
Yeah.
Or I saw at least one element of it. A minimum wage increase, I noticed, to $20 an hour, I think.
Yeah. New Zealand has figured out that, there are MMT economists there that finally broke through and, and got the word out. And that is, that's important. But in this country, this gained steam and is continuing to gain steam and come more and more and more to the front of conversations because of us, because you are talking to me on Netroots Radio right now, because, all of these progressives have been talking about MMT and raising it up and raising up the MMT economists, the big MMT thinkers, people like Stephanie Kelton. And anyway, of course, my brain immediately goes blank. But
well, you have a book on it as well. We'll make sure everybody, if you're looking to dip your toes in the water, I guess we can point them there too, but as well as to Stephanie Kelton's.
Yeah, Stephanie Kelton really has done a great job of speaking to laymen. It's the first really fabulous, detailed book on modern monetary theory that does a great job of speaking to people who spend their days worrying about whether or not they got all the groceries they need at the grocery store and, how they're going to pay the rent and those kinds of things. It doesn't require you to have any economic theory background.
Okay.
My little thing on Amazon, The Smart Bunny's Guide to Deficit and Austerity, also doesn't, it's extremely short, but it doesn't go into nearly the depth that Stephanie does. And I really think that her book is doing yeoman's work.
Okay.
And it's a bestseller for a reason.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, we'll point everybody to it for sure. But yeah, this is an easier thing to come to understand than you might think if you're worried about that. That's a good point and a good review of the book then. And
I think that I just read an interview that Stephanie gave last night, and that Bosengood actually pointed me to.
Oh, yeah?
Thank you very much, sir. But she was talking about she talks about framing all the time, and she's right about that. But one of the new frames that I heard her speak the first time in this interview that really hit home with me was that she said, thinking about the monetary system in terms of MMT isn't socialist or communist. Which is what, gets thrown at us.
Sure.
And it gets thrown at progressives a lot in general. It's protectionist. We are taking care of our economy, of our people, of our climate. Those are the things we want to do. And the policy that flows from MMT can be shaped by whoever uses it. In other words, MMT is just a description of the financial system. But the policy that you make from that frees you from worrying about the financial side and lets you concentrate on the real constraints and what we can and should be doing about the world and the economy within those constraints.
All right.
And one of those things is how we mitigate climate change.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that naturally is almost always immediately met with the challenge of outrageous. How much will it cost? And how can we pay? Your pie in the sky. We don't have that money. So.
But it is, when you think about it in terms of being protectionist, remember that one of the things that Trump really appealed to was this broad protectionist, me first, band that runs through American society, and frankly, I think is very much fear-founded. In other words, people who are afraid of whether or not they can afford to ever retire, or whether or not they can, pay the rent next month, or, people who are coming from a place of fear are not thinking perhaps in the most optimal way.
Probably not. And I guess to the extent that you can free them to do that, your solutions might be better. We're going to take a short break. I don't know if you've got time to stick with us for a few more minutes. Hope so.
Sure.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Arliss Bunny's still with us and talking about modern monetary theory, MMT. I'm starting to think that maybe we need to get the theory out of the name if we wanted people to stop thinking of it as a theory. That would be helpful, but I get the idea. And I mentioned to you during the break, and something I want to repeat for everybody here, I was thinking that it was a great illustration of what you had said about the real life constraints of that impact supply of materials and just all the things that go into understanding the classical economic picture of things, but that this meme that you had mentioned about the Nikkei exchange versus the Suez Canal was actually a great illustration of just that the some significant portion of the world's economy comes to a stop because of, I mean, it is quite literally in this case one boat getting stuck, but you can in fact choke off the economy by disrupting the ability of suppliers around the world to get their supply to people who need it, to the manufacturers who are going to process it further and add value and move these things around the world. And just quite literally, it comes down again to infrastructure. One of the more important reasons for investing in it. We keep thinking about bridges and tunnels here, but they work the same way. You can block one. You can't block them with a boat usually, but you can block them with trucks, or they just don't work, or they fall apart. But the point is that the distribution system is a real and physical thing. As you were pointing out, these are the real constraints on the economy, either running out of resources. I guess if your canals and bridges and tunnels are all fine, but you don't have the raw materials to move, then that screws things up. Or you don't have people to dig the stuff out of the ground, or whatever you're doing to extract your materials, or to ship or manufacture the goods. Another thing, but it shouldn't be difficult to understand, and it's got a real parallel in classical economics, that these bottlenecks, these choke points, are real things, and they represent real investments in infrastructure. And nothing could make the point more starkly than actually getting a boat jammed sideways in the Suez Canal. Yeah.
The Ever Given stuck there. Yeah. The one of the things I started following, wonks, we go off on these bizarre tangents. And one of the things I started following several years ago was shipping. So when the Ever Given got stuck, I was like, okay, there's exactly the thing that I've been worrying about all this time. And it was interesting because during the shutdown, one of the things that suddenly occurred to me in the middle of, trying to deal with everything that was going on at my company and, COVID fears and making sure my 89-year-old father was safe and, all the thousands of things we were all trying to, parse during that period of time. One of the things that just like random things that pops into my head is, where are all the shipping containers? because they got delivered to ports, right? Mm-hmm. Crews came in, those things got delivered into ports.
Yeah.
But what that means is that they're not in China. So when everything gets turned on again, they're not in China. And that's why when everything, I mean, I know this is a stupid thing, but when everything got turned back on, when economies started coming back up, and there's this long delay between the time that China turned its economy essentially back on and, we started receiving products. Mm-hmm. The problem was that the containers were all like sitting in the Netherlands, sitting at Long Beach, sitting in, they were all not in China. They had to get on ships and get back to China, then get loaded, then get back to us.
I love logistics.
That is a real choke point. And it's the most basic thing. It seems like the most ridiculous. The boxes, stuff goes in, has to be where the stuff is. But the boxes weren't there, so the stuff didn't get here. And those kinds of things are real. Huh. And those are the kinds of things that we should be paying attention to.
Didn't occur to me. I mean, I'm not a logistics person, and I guess because I'm not, I'm always fascinated by just the level, the mundane things that you have to keep track of. That obviously, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Obviously, you got to have the boxes there. And I'm just thinking of I don't know. For some reason, what comes to mind is Jared Kushner and his friends sitting around a table trying to solve the PPE problem and saying, I don't get it. China makes this stuff. Let's get it from China. Why aren't we getting it? And they don't have any boxes to put on. So they're having to come up with solutions like, well, send the New England Patriots plane there to pick it up and just stuff it under the seats. They got to come up with something like that. But you can see them doing I don't understand. I used the formulas that we learned in school. You remember when we got our MBAs and it's not working. Yeah, well, there's no line in here for the containers. That's just always a given.
Nobody thought, where is
why don't
the
they make
box?
some containers?
That's right.
I don't know. That's a good question. Where do they make?
Well, and there are things like, okay, so the Ever Given is stuck in the Suez Canal, and so shipping companies are thinking, okay, we're going to have to go the long way around.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that they waited instead of just turning and going the long way around, other than the fuel cost, which is substantial, was that there is a piracy problem off of North Africa. They were afraid to go past North Africa. And so shipping companies are frantically contacting the U.S. Navy saying, can you run blockades or something so that we can get through this thing? Because this is a serious problem. Huh. And it's things like that. We need to do whatever it takes to help resolve the economic issues where pirates are.
I feel like we took care of that in 1800.
There's more shipping flexibility. So those kinds of things, those all impinge upon the ability of the world economy to flex and move in the way it needs to move.
This is another thing I didn't really think too much about. It's not even Talk Like a Pirate Day yet. I can't be thinking about these things. But I guess a serious and like I said, I thought we took care of these North African pirates in about 1800, but it still keeps cropping up because I guess, look, wherever there's trade, there's an opportunity for piracy, whether it's at sea or not. So I guess that's to be expected. That should be built in as a cost. You imagine teaching that to MBA students now. Don't forget to add a line item for piracy.
Pirates.
However you want to define it. Whether that's things that fall off the back of a truck in Queens, or
that's right,
things that get stolen off a ship in North Africa, or the boss taking home a couple of cases of the stuff off the top. These things happen.
That's right.
So,
those are real constraints. The things that are not real would be things like the bird rule.
Yeah,
we are still genuflecting to the bird rule of all. Now, for those of you who aren't wonks and don't, know this kind
Overall
of thing
wants
just
here.
casually. The Byrd Rule basically says we can't increase the deficit beyond a 10-year window. Well, first of all, worrying about increasing the deficit is not what we should be thinking about at all. But why a 10-year window? It's just a random, illusionary thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
so
we're all into base 10 and all,
when you hear people talk about the Byrd Rule, that they are making up a reason to not give the economy nice things.
Yeah. And in many ways. I mean, I just ran into something the other day that Greg mentioned. It was also a 10-year situation. And as I mentioned to people, is that anytime you see something, good or bad, whenever you see something expiring after 10 years,
yeah,
it's
that's
a pretty good
Byrd
bet.
Rule.
Yeah, that the Byrd Rule made you do it, that it was something you passed through reconciliation. And in this case, it actually wasn't, but was something that was just as arbitrary, that they had basically in striking one deal or another. And this took us way back in the Wayback Machine to the fiscal cliff and the super committee and all of these things but again, that they said we're going to put these spending caps in place. And that part of the big allure of the big infrastructure project was that it could, even under, classic, now wrong economic theory, they were constrained from doing this, and they couldn't. They were worried about this big spending bill. They couldn't do it because of the spending caps that were in the way. It was a 10-year window.
There's
of
another
spending
one.
caps
Yes,
but again, just sort of an arbitrary creation. Arbitrary in the sense of. They had to pick a number. We picked 10. 10's good. We love base 10. We have 10 fingers. But that's like literally the reason that you couldn't spend money on infrastructure, not this year. I know the bridge is falling apart now, but you got to wait until next year. Why? Because people have 10 fingers. And so we think of 10 as a good round number for things, and it's got a 0 in it, and the 0 is actually round. And that's why we made the law say the spending caps were in place for 10 years. Now, meanwhile, along the way, several times Congress waived the spending caps, raised the spending caps, voted to ignore the spending caps because something was super important to them, which should illustrate, just like the Byrd Rule, which sometimes gets waived, or for that matter, the rule that said you can only change the way the filibuster works with a 2/3 vote to the Senate. Well, not today. Today we say no to that by majority vote, and then oh my God, but you're going to turn the Senate into the House. And yet I have looked every day, and the Senate has not yet turned into the House. This has not happened.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's just to put it in another context, right? Things that people say will make the world fall apart. Sometimes they really don't. And sometimes the reason we're doing something is for a very dumb reason, or somebody needed to put a number on it. How long should we have the spending caps? 11 years. Why 11? Why not 10? That's so much more sensible. All right, 10. Okay. But there was no reason for it. Okay. Sure.
And the thing is, I think we are at an inflection point right now. I really believe this, that because people understood, and I think widely understand, that during the Obama administration, there was not the political will to spend enough into the economy to rescue the economy from what ended up being basically a 10-year hit from the recession.
The Great Recession.
And
so great.
Some people have still not recovered. Some people, what we're going through now is, this, we cannot allow this to be still the story of our economy 10 years from now. We can't afford for this to be the story of our economy 3 years from now. I think people at least understand that much, which is why things like the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, this infrastructure bill, I think that's why they're going to go through. But the infrastructure bill, if it's $2 trillion, that's not enough. This infrastructure bill should be, $5 trillion this year, $5 trillion next year. Spend that money. And the reason that we should be doing it is because we have this huge, this huge sponge out in our economy in terms of capacity, both human capacity and resource capacity. And when I think of capacity, I think of problems that we can and should be solving. Mm-hmm. So, yes. If we just spent $5 trillion on greening the economy, imagine what that would do.
Well, you're stuck imagining it for the moment, but people,
imagine how powerful that would be. If we just decided that we are done with poverty, imagine what that would do. Imagine the level of desperation that would take out of people's lives. And then what would they do with that, sort of brain space, that energy, instead of worrying about how they're going to feed their kids. Right. What if they're thinking about, hey, let's save up to build a house. Hey, let's, what else are they doing if they're not worrying about their next meal?
That's supposed to be that too. I guess this is a good. I don't. For me, the exercise is to try to compare it to classical economics, and maybe I can use that to convince my son, who's an economics student, to adopt some of this stuff. But how would classical economics explain something like this? It feels like something that conservatives would dismiss immediately as saying, "Well, I don't know what this is. New Age stuff, brain space. What are you talking about?" But if people are not worrying and scrambling through whatever
and voting
means,
with their fear.
True. To feed their kids, to take care of their family's basic needs. Right. What would they do instead? And I mean, people say, well, I guess the initial reaction of conservatives is, well, moral hazard thing. They love to throw that one out there. And then people will do nothing. Is what they'll do. You provide them with enough basic income to make ends meet, they will opt to do nothing, which is this weird assumption because if you take a rich person and tell him, I'm going to free you from the burden of having to fill out this paperwork for your taxes, even if you don't believe it produces anything and just becomes zero, I'm going to make you do the paperwork. What if I freed you from that paperwork? In the classic terms, they think, well, if you give me my money back, then I will invest it. I'll create jobs. I'll do things. Exactly. I'll come up with great ideas to make myself richer. And don't worry about it because, capitalism, it's okay. It's its own reward. I make myself richer by creating jobs and other people benefit too. But then the assumption is, I guess, if you find a poor person and say, don't worry about food and housing, we have you covered, that they won't say, what might it like to be rich? I think I'd rather be that. What if I came up with this idea or did this thing or worked at this job so that I had even more money and things were even better? Now, the poor people want to lie down and do nothing. Really?
Yeah, that's exactly the way that Reagan framed it when he started talking about, poor people in a variety of really heartless terms. Yeah. I mean, in other words, when he started getting us to really think about poor people as being lazy as a political structure. I mean, people already did. I'm not saying that didn't already exist. I'm just saying he tapped into it and crystallized it in a way our politics had never really spoken quite so facially before.
Mm-hmm. I see what you mean. And it caught on. And I mean,
but
not
the
because
thing
it
to
was
say
new,
to your
but
son
it was old. Yes.
Is that what he's learning is all learning based upon when the gold standard existed.
Yes, true, right.
It's all based upon economic theory developed when there was a gold standard. That's gone. It's been gone since the 70s.
Yeah.
And what happened was that while the Federal Reserve absorbed that concept to some degree, whether they say it out loud or not, they did absorb that concept because it's the way they operate. Nobody else did. Politicians didn't get it. And politicians are the people who make policy.
Yeah.
So that's where it matters. And what your son is learning is something that it's like it's like as if I was being taught to churn butter. It's all very well and good, but that's really not, it really doesn't apply to my life today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Because, I can do much more productive things with my time than churn butter.
Yes.
And churning butter has changed very much, dramatically since everybody had to do it in their own home in order to have butter.
Yeah. And we no longer have to do this. And the gold standard is gone, dead gone. Aww.
And when there was a gold standard, even when there was a gold standard, it wasn't as constrained as people think. But I won't go down that rabbit hole because that's a whole different thing.
That might be too much. Okay. I think it's starting to take shape. Also, by the way, I want to comment on one of the other things that you brought up, which I think offers us another parallel. As you were saying, the idea of MMT catching on and people, whether they fully adopted or not, understanding some of the concepts or being prepared to discuss spending bills, not in terms of whether or not the zero's balanced, but in terms of whether or not it does the things we need actually done in the physical world, and getting comfortable with that. And I guess, again, because of my own experience, we'll compare it to the filibuster reform movement that for many years there were just people who were like, no, you don't understand. That's not how it works. And to which I said, well, one, it is, but I don't actually need to convince you of that. Or rather, it doesn't pay a whole lot in most cases to convince you. Not only is that the way it works, but that always has been the way it works. But we're here, right here and now. Can it work this way? It can. Can they stop you from making it work this way? They cannot. So the only thing standing in the way at this point is your insistence that this isn't the way it works. The minute you decide it is the way it works, it's the way it works. And, and here the advanced lesson, just to go back to that other point that we dismissed a minute ago, is you will also find the minute you decide this is the way it works and it becomes the way it works, you will discover, this was always the way it worked. After all, now I understand what you were saying about that. It didn't matter to me at the time, but now it does. Now I get a better context of this. But the moment enough people say it is the way it works, or at least can be the way it works, let's do it, and it's safe, and it doesn't magically turn anything into anything else. It just always was there, and then they do it. Fine, you do it. And the same sort of dynamic is at play here. You always thought you needed to have the right amount of gold. Now you realize it's been some time since we had to. It's not true anymore. And it's been that way for a very long time, though you were convinced otherwise. But enough people have said either there's a theory under which that doesn't matter if you need to have it explained to you in terms of theory, or that bridge fell down and it needs to be fixed, and that's all there is to it. Take the deficit and move on. You want to mark it as an L, fine. Take the L and go. But the bridge gets fixed, period. Right? We're all agreed on that. And then afterwards, nothing else. Hey, the economy didn't collapse. There wasn't rampant inflation. Investors didn't flee that state for whatever reason. People thought they would do that. Maybe this is the way it works.
Well, we bailed out banks.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And the world did not come to an end. And the thing about it is there are lots of things we did wrong when we did that.
Yes. But
still, the world did not come to an end. The economy did not come to an end.
That's true.
And the risk in our having bailed out the banks is that we put the money into the wrong place in the economy. We spent that money into the wrong place. You don't spend the money into the top of the economy if you want to save an economy. You spend the money into the bottom of the economy.
Yes, true. And I guess not into the computers.
Yes, there probably was some stabilization of financial structures that needed to happen at that time. I'm not saying there wasn't, because we all have money in banks, but that we just didn't manage it very well.
I can see that.
We all remember those arguments from that time.
Yeah, right. Well, that's true, and they do bring back memories. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point too, just as you were illustrating. I suppose if you're trying to stabilize an economy, you can't put it all into the people with the zeros and the computers, or too many of these things turn into zeros and don't go anywhere.
Well, and it makes sense that if you're trying to fuel an economy, you put money into places where the money will churn.
Yes,
in other words, where the money
that's
will experience
classic.
activity. So you spend it into places where people will take that money and spend it. That's what's happening with the surplus. That's why economists are watching for the effect that the surplus has on the economy, because they are expecting the economy to heat up some. It's why the Fed is evaluating their position on inflation, because they are expecting the stimulus. I keep saying surplus instead of stimulus. Sorry. They're expecting the stimulus to add some heat to the economy, because most of the people who got that money are spending it.
Yes,
that's not what happens when, well, yeah, sure. Banks spent some of that money too, buying other banks, but
true. Yeah.
But they didn't spend that into the economy per se. No. And so where you spend money into an economy matters a lot. So when we talk about spending large sums, we need to be smart about where that goes, and make sure that is in line with the policy that's important to us. Because while modern monetary theory is a description of the monetary system, where we spend the money, that is policy. And as progressives and as Democrats, that's where we should lean in.
Okay. All right. I believe we have some good rallying points and marching orders from the discussion here, and some great metaphors too. I'm still thinking that that ship is going to be a very valuable metaphor for a lot of things in the future. I was thinking about it too. Did I read somewhere that the size of the ships, container ships, has increased some outrageous percentage over the last decade or so? These are the biggest things ever moving through the Suez Canal, and I'm wondering if there's an inflationary metaphor there, that they finally loaded this thing up too much so that it became an obstruction point.
More than 100 times the size of a ship that the Suez was designed for. More than 100 times.
Yeah, so we need infrastructure work there too.
The things to take away are don't think of a household.
Okay, right.
Right. The federal monetary system is not like a household. Policy, right? Yeah. Poverty is a policy choice, but so is not spending money on climate change, not spending money on ending the wealth gap, not spending the money on ending inequity and inequality. Those are policy choices. Those are not limited by financial wherewithal.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, that opens up a lot. And, plenty to do here, and I guess infrastructure just the opening round of it. And I don't know, maybe people will become, I guess maybe a silver lining to whatever reason they chose to limit this thing to $2 trillion. Perhaps there's a silver lining in that they may think that allows us to roll out a $3 trillion thing focused on something else next, and then a $5 trillion one after that, but just upping the ante each time. But I'm not entirely confident that that's what they're doing. But it would make a good post hoc explanation if it turns out to be true. But I appreciate your spending twice the time, a 100% increase in the time we expected to spend on this for you this morning. See, it didn't become inflationary, and hopefully it won't topple your business.
Well, and happy International Bunny Day to everybody out there.
All right, yes.
Please don't give actual bunnies to your children.
Oh, yeah, right, okay. True, right. The chocolate one's still okay?
Yes, make mine chocolate.
Those. Okay, excellent. We'll do that. Thanks very much, though, for spending this much time with us on this subject. It's sometimes still confusing, but I think the metaphors laid out here give us a grounding to walk away with an understanding of this stuff. And I really appreciate it. And I'll direct everybody to the proper books as well. And I hope we'll have the opportunity to have you chime in again soon. And enjoy your International Bunny Day. And we'll find an excuse to push this ball forward in the near future. We'll be talking about this infrastructure bill for weeks, I'm sure. and we'll be looking forward to your additional comment. Thanks again.
Take care.
You do the same. And now time for us to take care and wrapping things up and handing the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Coming up next right here on Netroots Radio, we're going to, we've got the time now, so maybe I can switch over to the description of what's coming up next and pay some real attention to that. Thanks, Arliss, again, and we'll speak to you again soon. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, now open, as he always describes things in his previews of what's coming up. Let me see. What do we got here? Republicans, of course, cannot wait to turn on Matt Gaetz. So, yes, more about that, not just the first hour of this show. Republicans also pretending infrastructure only means roads and bridges. We really meant to get into this as a topic. Justice, of course, will save the day next.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's something we can do and look forward to, if not this weekend, something in the near future. Hulu producing a documentary series based on the 1619 Project. So for those of you who knew it was a worthwhile read but can't sit down and read anything because Twitter and attention deficit disorder, it's coming to TV. I'm thankful for that. We'll see you next week.